Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Good morning, Eric. And good morning, Andrea. Happy Monday. I hope everyone had a good weekend, a relaxing weekend. This morning, we're doing Focus Activity 6-7. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jennifer. I'm a teacher at English in the City. This morning, we are doing Focus 6-7 Geography. And I must admit that geography is not a very good subject for me. In fact, when I was in school, geography was one of the most difficult subjects that I studied, simply because there were a lot of facts and things that I had to memorize, I had to remember. And unfortunately, I wasn't very good in geography. Andrea, do you like geography? I preferred art and music, but I also realized the importance of geography. It is an important subject. Good morning, Ranieri. Happy Monday. Thank you for joining us today. Yes, Eric, I agree. Geography is very difficult because there are a lot of facts to remember, a lot of names of countries and cities, and also the numbers if you want to remember the population or the distance between certain areas. And so for me, it was very challenging, geography, as a subject in school. And then Anieri, this morning we are doing Focus Activity 6-7, and we're talking about geography. Good morning, Christina. Thank you for joining us today. How are you? I hope you had a good weekend. My weekend was somewhat exciting. I mean, we were all home, but I was very busy. I had a lot of things to do this weekend. Oh, you're very good at geography. Oh, excellent, Eric. It's definitely a plus. But we realize that geography is more important nowadays because the world is getting smaller and smaller. It's not like before, where when you lived on a continent, North America, maybe you never traveled to another country or another continent. You're very interested. You're interested in geography. Geography is interesting, I agree. But personally, it's difficult for me to remember all the facts. But since so many people travel now, and so many people are able to visit other places, even virtually, via computer, via internet. Oh, good morning, Helen. Thank you for joining us today. How are you? I hope you had a good weekend. This morning's focus activity, we're talking about geography and also how important it is now because people travel more than ever before. People are knowledgeable about other places more than before. So it's important also to understand the different continents, the different countries, and the different cultures that are all around us. Okay, let's get started in this morning's focus. Good morning, Elena. I hope you had a good weekend. In this morning's focus, we will be comparing geographic locations. So, talking about the characteristics of certain places, describing them, and then comparing them to another place. We will be using superlatives, comparatives. Good morning, Gianmarco. I hope you had a good weekend. Thank you for joining us. This morning's focus activity is about geography. So, any facts that some of us may remember from before, or for those of you who are in school now, let's talk a little bit about geography and the vocabulary that's associated with it. Before we get started, grammatically speaking, we will be using comparatives and superlatives. What is a comparative? And when do we use it? For example, if I have an adjective like big, my house is big. How do I make the adjective a comparative? If it's a regular adjective, there's something I add on the end to make it a comparative. If it's a regular adjective, my house is big, but my sister's house is bigger. Oh, okay, very good. Also bigger than is, my sister's house is bigger than mine. Or more than. Thank you very much, Eric. My sister's house is bigger than mine. Thank you very much, Danieri. And look at this comparison here. More beautiful than. Good morning, Monica. And thanks for joining us this morning. We have two examples here. Very good, Elena. Your house is bigger than mine. If it's a regular adjective, we add ER at the end. No, at the end. Big becomes bigger than mine. If it's a long adjective, like beautiful, it's not beautifuler. It's more beautiful than. Very good. When do we use comparatives? When we're comparing two things. But if we have a group of things, for example, my house is big, my sister's house is bigger than mine, but my brother's house, my brother's house is the biggest. Okay, Monica, you can listen. But Monica, if you want to say something, you can say something too. Okay. So we have big is the adjective. Bigger is the comparative. And the biggest is the superlative, is the most out of all of them. So if we add an ER for a regular adjective, bigger, we add EST, the biggest. If we have a long adjective like beautiful, it becomes the most beautiful. My house is beautiful, but my sister's house is more beautiful than mine. My brother's house is the most beautiful. Very good, Eric. These are examples of superlatives. The best, the biggest, the smallest. Okay, just a little bit of a recap on when to use comparatives and superlatives. Let's take a little geography quiz. Where are they? We're going to read through these phrases and see if we can discover or guess where they are. Lake Baikal is the deepest lake in the world. 1,637 meters deep. It holds 20% of the world's fresh water. Lake Baikal is in. Where is this lake? So in this text, in this short description of Lake Baikal, we have examples of an example of a superlative. So while you're thinking of where this lake is, what is the superlative we see in the description? Lake Baikal is the deepest lake in the world, 101,637 meters deep. Thank you very much, Andrea. It's in Siberia in Russia. Really? And the superlative here in the description, excellent, Eric, is deepest. Very good, Helen, is the deepest lake in the world. It's in Russia. Excellent. Wow, that's interesting. If it holds 20% of the world's fresh water, That's a lot of fresh water. So it's very, very important then for the ecosystem. Let's take a look at the second description. The widest river in the world is the Amazon River in, oh, this one is kind of easy. Where is the Amazon River? In the Amazon. We also have another example of a superlative in this description. So where is this river? Does anyone know the name of the river? And which is the superlative? Or what is the superlative? So the widest river in the world is the Amazon River. I know, well, the most important river in the United States, I believe the longest river in the United States, the highest. Oh, thank you, Eric. The highest waterfall, that's the superlative in the last description. Before we get to the waterfall, though, the Amazon River is in South America. Thank you very much, Andrea. And the superlative here is the widest. So we see that Lake Baikal is in Russia, the country of Russia. The widest river is in South America, the continent South America. And thank you, the highest waterfall. The highest waterfall in the world is Angel Falls at 979 meters, is located in, where is this waterfall? And Eric already told us that the superlative in this description is highest. Highest. In fact, if anyone has seen the animated film Up, I believe that's where they were going. Remember the film where the man attached all the balloons to his house and he flew away and he traveled around the world and he finally landed in, thank you, Eric, highest. He landed at the waterfall. That's where he wanted to go with his wife. And this was a waterfall in Venezuela. Thank you very much, Monica. Thank you. So the highest waterfall in the world is Angel Falls in Venezuela. Excellent, Eric. That's the film I was talking about, Up. How many of us wouldn't love to just tie balloons to our house and fly away? I would right now, actually. I would love to fly away. So we have, in the last slide, we have examples, grammatical examples of superlatives. The deepest lake, the widest river, the highest waterfall. You too, Eric, absolutely. Okay, let's go on to the next one, our next slide. Here we have geographic locations. What are these? These are how we describe the landscape of a continent, of a country. We describe what we find in certain areas. Geographic locations, what are these? We have a list of words. These are vocabulary words that we use to describe, that we use to make geographic descriptions. Valley, river, desert, island, canyon, lake, mountains, and cliffs. Let's take a look at each of these images, and we want to attach a word to an image. For example, A is valley. As you tell me the name that goes to each image, for example, B, see if you can describe it as well. Thank you, Eric. Valley is A. And think if you can attach, very good, Monica, valley is A. If you can give me an adjective that goes with this geographic location. For example, a valley, we know, is downwards. So a valley is deep. A valley is deep. A valley can also be wide. A valley can also be wide. Let's take a look at B. Let's take a look at B. Okay, we see the second image in B. It's not a valley. What is it? You know that A is a valley. Valleys can be deep and valleys can be wide. B is mountain. Mountains. Green mountains. Very good. Mountains can be green and mountains can also be Mountains can also be Can anyone give me an adjective? Mountains can be high. Very good, Helen. Mountains can be high. High mountains. Thank you very much, Ranieri. Mountains can be high and valleys can be deep. I just gave you the answer for C. C is lake. Thank you, Monica. Mountains can be high. We see that valleys can be deep. Mountains can be high. I already gave you the answer to C. Thank you, Eric. C is lake. Can anyone give me an adjective that describes a lake? And don't say wet. We already know that lakes are made of water. Thank you, Monica. C is lake. Can anyone give me an adjective for a lake? A lake is also, in fact, we used the adjective, the superlative in the description of the lake in Russia. The lake in Russia is big. Lakes can be big. Very good. Thank you very much, Helen. Lakes can be big. Lakes can also be deep. They can be deep. So thank you very much, Elena. Lakes can be big and deep. Valleys can be deep and wide. Mountains can be high or tall. And D, it's a deep lake. Very good, Monica. It's a big, deep lake. What are cliffs? Eric, we're not up to cliffs yet. Relax. Right now we're up to D. I'm going to tell you what a cliff is in a minute. What are cliffs? Very good, because cliffs is plural. What is a cliff? What are cliffs? Cliffs are actually F, but shh, because right now we're on D. What is D? What is D? So let's take a look at D is an island. Can someone give me an adjective that describes an island? Thank you, Monica. Thank you, Helen. An island can be, thank you, Eric. D is island. In fact, I grew up on an island, a small tropical island. Beautiful description, Andrea. Small, tropical are two adjectives that describe an island. I grew up on an island. The name of the island is Long Island. Long Island, because it's very long. In fact, it takes 5 hours to drive from the western point to the eastern point of the island. It takes 5 hours. That's how long the island is. But it only takes maybe an hour to drive from the north to the south. Doesn't take long at all. But it takes 5 hours to drive from the west to the east. All right. We said that D is island. What about E? Does everyone see the image E? What do we see in E? I don't see any water. I don't see any green. It's a desert. Thank you, Eric. E is a desert. What adjectives describe a desert? In the daytime, but at night, it's very... No dessert. Exactly, Eric. It's not dessert. It's desert. The Sahara Desert, that's one of the biggest deserts. Is that the biggest desert in the world? Can we think of an adjective that describes a desert? An arid African desert. Excellent adjective, Andrea. Arid. What does it mean to be arid? Arid is an excellent adjective, but what does it mean? A desert can be hot. It's a hot desert. Hot, boiling, and arid. There we have that adjective again, arid. What does arid mean? It says, oh, the desert is arid. What is arid? Does anyone know what it means? And then we're going to get to F, which Eric already hinted about. F. Arid means dry. Arid means extremely, extremely dry. Dry and dust. Well, dusty is a different adjective, but arid means very, very dry. The desert at night is cold and in the day it is hot. The desert at night is cold, but in the day it is hot. Very good, Ranieri. And that's very true. A lot of us think that, oh, well, the deserts are so hot, but no, at night it gets very, very cold. Let's take a look at F. There isn't any water. Thank you, Monica. In the desert, there isn't any water. Exactly, Ranieri. In the day. At night, but in the day. That's the prepositions because things happen at night or in the daytime. If we take a look at F, what is F? We're down to river, canyon, and cliff. I think we all know what G is. In fact, that looks a little bit like home. So F. Oh, Eric, did you already tell us F? Yes, you did. I'm so sorry. There are camels in the desert. Eric told us F. F is cliffs. Cliffs. Yes, there are camels in the desert. There are not camels on the cliffs. So, what are our adjectives for each of these locations? Valley, deep and wide. Mountains, tall, high, and I think someone said green. Lake is big and deep. Island is small, tropical, or big and beautiful. A desert is arid, hot, but cold at night. F is cliffs, the white cliffs of Dover. Thank you, Monica. Thank you, Elena. The cliffs of Dover. What adjective describes a cliff? Now, taking a look at the image here. Steep. Very good. Steep, amazing cliffs. Whereas the slope of a hill or a mountain can be more gradual. Mountains can be steep too. The drop off at a cliff is straight down. You usually can't walk down a cliff. You just, and you fall right off. But a mountain, you can climb down a mountain, you can scale a mountain, but a cliff is extremely difficult. Why? Because as Andrea said, cliffs are steep, but they're amazing too. Cliffs of, in Ireland, what's that? Then I need cliffs of what? Are those the cliffs? These are actually, are these cliffs in Ireland? That I didn't know. Let's take a look at G. Is G a canyon or a river? We have some excellent adjectives here. We have deep, wide valley, tall, high mountains, deep, big lake, a big, deep lake, small tropical island, a hot, arid desert, a steep, amazing cliff. And in G is a river. Which river is it? It's not the Amazon, and it's not the Mississippi. Cliffs are extremely dangerous, Monica. Thanks for adding that. Cliffs are more dangerous than mountains because a mountain you can manage somewhat with equipment and the right people, but a cliff is extremely dangerous. The longest river, so a river can be long. This is in Florence, and you see the old bridge. I know. So we have a long river. Rivers can also be deep. Anytime you have water, it can be deep. I know there's the Arno in Florence. It is. It's ours, and it's beautiful. A river can be very deep as well. A river can be very deep as well. Okay, H. H is a canyon. We know it's a canyon because it's the last vocabulary. Yes, it's Ponte Vecchio. Old bridge. Old bridge. We know that H is canyon. And can anyone think of an adjective or two adjectives that describe a canyon? And here's a more complicated question for you. Thank you, Eric. H is canyon. What's the difference between a valley and a canyon? That's an excellent question. If someone knows the answer, just type the answer in the conversation box because I would like to know. If someone says, no, that's a valley, or no, that's a canyon, what's the difference? Monica, what's wrong? And a valley can be narrow. What about a canyon? Can a canyon be narrow too? It's okay, Monica. Whatever it is, it's okay. The Dead Valley. Gee, Monica, that's a little dark, but I guess a valley can be dead. We're in a canyon. We're in the canyon. We're in H. Can someone give me an adjective for a canyon? Like the Grand Canyon in the United States is a wonderful, wonderful thing. I've never seen it. I've only seen pictures of it, but it's supposed to be amazingly beautiful. So what's the difference between a canyon and a valley? Let's think about that as we go on to our next slide. Here we have adjectives. Now, this is something we already did. In the previous slide, we had our geographic locations. The Dead Valley is in Utah. Yes, it is, Monica. Thank you for that fun fact. In the last slide, in a valley, there are inhabitants, while in a canyon, not. Fantastic. Everybody say thank you, Gianmarco. Thank you for that excellent comparison. Because you can live in a valley. There could be neighborhoods and houses in a valley. But in a canyon, no. A canyon is like a crack in the land structure. But a valley is a gentle discesa, is a gentle slope downward. But a canyon, no. Okay, here we have our adjectives. Now we already talked about different adjectives that describe our geographic locations. Here we have other adjectives. Some are the same, Some are different, but what's the opposite of each? Eric, focus. We have wide, deep, and high. The opposite of wide is, Eric, what do you think? What's the opposite of wide? And if we remember our geographic locations, a river can be wide. Wide, well, wide, what's large? Monica. Large, someone can give us the opposite of large, but before we talk about the opposite of large, what's the opposite of wide? We said that rivers can be wide, valleys can be wide. A lake, on the other hand, is big. But what's the opposite of wide? For example, if a river is very wide, you can't cross it. You may need a bridge to get over the river. The opposite of wide is narrow. Thank you very much, Elena. Thank you very much, Eric and Monica. Stretto is narrow. Thank you for the translation. So the opposite of wide is narrow. If a river is narrow, maybe you can cross on foot. But if a river is too wide, you can't. Canyon is the consequence of earthquakes. Really? So if there's a tremendous earthquake, I'm back again. That's amazing. I didn't know. Thank you, Monica. And thank you, Daniele, for that observation. What's the opposite of deep? We said a river can be deep, a lake can be deep. Because the deepest lake was in Russia. Remember, the deepest lake was in Russia. But if a lake is not deep, then it is shallow. Thank you, Elena. Shallow. For example, if we think of a pool, when you go swimming in a pool, Pietra in Jordan. Hey, very interesting. Thank you very much. Thank you, Helen. And Eric, yes, the opposite of deep is shallow. If we think of the pool, when you go swimming in the pool in the summertime, if you have a child, you say, be careful, don't go in the deep end. Stay where it's shallow so you can still walk around. If it's too deep and you can't swim, that's a dangerous situation. Thank you, everybody. The opposite of deep is shallow. And high, the canyon to go to Pietra is narrow and from earthquakes. Eric, I don't understand that. Earthquakes, sorry, Jennifer, a person can also, yes, a person can be shallow too. Excellent. Oh, I just gave you the answer. Everyone notice, water can be shallow and people can be shallow. What does it mean? Getting off geography for a moment. If a person is shallow, thinking about water. If water is very, very deep, maybe you don't always know what's at the bottom because there's some mystery. There are things to discover. The ocean is extremely deep. So if you dive deep in the ocean, you discover certain things. Superficial people, excellent, Elena. But if a person is shallow, it means everything you see is what they are. There's nothing else there. So if they're only surface, then they're superficial, and they are shallow. Okay, let's see. We said the opposite of high is low. Let's not confuse high and low with deep and shallow. If we're talking about water, water is deep or shallow. If we're talking about mountains, mountains can be high or low. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Here we have our opposites. All right, now this is just a review of what we've already done in the previous slides, describing geographic features. Now, we already brainstormed about different adjectives that go with our geographic features and locations. Here we have a list of our geographic features again: valley, river, canyon, lake, mountains, and cliffs. We have our opposing adjectives: wide and narrow, deep and shallow, high and low. We want to take each of these features and put them in a category. And I think some of these categories can be used. There can be more than one category for each feature. For example, a valley can be wide or narrow, and a valley can be deep or shallow. What about a river? Which adjectives can we use to describe a river? Considering the we already went over a lot of the adjectives that describe our different geographic features. So we have an idea. And now we have the list again of our geographic features, and we want to put them in correct categories, keeping in mind that some of these adjectives, more than one group of adjectives, can be used to describe a feature. For example, a valley can be a wide, deep valley. A valley can be a narrow and shallow. No, you have a problem with the connection. Does anyone else have a problem with the connection? I'm still here. If you have a problem hearing me or seeing me, let me know, because I'm still here. I'm still here. So looking through our geographic features, let's decide which feature goes in which adjective category. And we can use more than one category. Gianmarco, no. Do you have a problem or you don't have a problem? You can see me and hear me just fine. Okay, Elena, thank you. You can see and hear me too. Excellent. All right, let's consider then our geographical feature, river. A river can also be wide or narrow, and a river can be deep and shallow. And keep in mind that these adjectives can be mixed and matched depending on the actual river. For example, you can have a very wide, shallow river, meaning that it's wide, but you can walk across it because it's shallow. Because there are parts, I believe there are parts of the Mississippi as well, where they're shallow enough that you can cross them by foot. No, you can cross them on foot, by car, by bus, by train, by bike. Excellent, Andrea. I'm glad that everybody can see and hear me. Let's take a look at our geographical feature, canyon. What adjectives can we use to describe a canyon? Now, as Ranieri explained to us before, canyons are the results or the consequence of earthquakes. incredible earthquakes that break the land. The idea is amazing. That a shake, a violent movement that's so strong that you break the earth. You make a big crack, and that's a canyon. So what are adjectives that describe canyons? Has anyone here ever visited a canyon? I've always wanted to visit the Grand Canyon in the United States. I have friends that have visited it, and they said that it's one of the things that everyone needs to see, because seeing photographs or hearing descriptions simply doesn't do it justice, because it's an incredible sight. It's an incredible sight. Wide, narrow, deep, and shallow. We're talking about a canyon. Very good question, Elena. We can use wide and narrow, deep and shallow for canyon, but not high and low, because the canyon is the negative space between the land. So the sides of a canyon can be steep. The sides of a canyon can be high, but the canyon itself is either wide or narrow, deep or shallow. No, thank you. Very good question, Danieli. But a canyon, as I said, is the negative space, whereas a mountain is the land itself is. Oh, I just give you an answer. The land can be high or low, because the mountain itself is the structure, okay? But the canyon is the space between the land, okay? And we're up to lake. What adjectives do we have that describe a lake? In fact, there are, oh, you're welcome. What adjectives can we use to describe a lake? Lake can be wide or narrow, deep and shallow. A lake, as we said before, Helen, that a river can be wide or narrow, but a lake can actually be big or small, because the lake itself is an enclosed area of water. So it can be big or small, deep or shallow. A river, on the other hand, can be wide and narrow. And we have mountain here. The mountains, what are some adjectives that describe our mountains? Deep and shallow. So we understand the difference between a lake and a river. Very good. A lake, thank you, Barb Ranieri. A lake can be deep or shallow, or big and small. We don't have big and small here, but there are lakes that are described as the biggest lake. The biggest, deepest lake is, but the smallest lake is. Whereas if we're describing a river, then we can use wide and narrow. How about mountains? What adjectives can we use to describe mountains? You know, I would like to visit the mountains in northern Italy. I have some friends who live up there, and they always invite me to come stay with them, to come visit. So it's a long drive, though. But the pictures that they send me are breathtaking. Does everyone here, do you like to go to the mountains? Mountains can be high and low. Very good. Mountains can be high and low. A mountain can also be steep. A mountain can also be steep, like a cliff can be steep. Does anyone know the opposite of steep? Very good. Thank you, Danieri. Thank you, Helen. Mountains can be high and low. What about a cliff? While you're giving me adjectives that describe a cliff, or adjectives that describe cliffs, what is the opposite of steep? If we say that the cliff is very steep, what's the opposite of that? That's an interesting question, the opposite of steep. Because steep isn't an adjective that we hear all the time. There are certain things that can be described as steep. And depending on what we're describing, it actually changes the opposite. Because if we're describing a cliff can be steep. A lake can also be high. Andrea, are you asking me a question? A lake can, like a high lake, a mountain lake, and a low undersea surface. Well, Andrea, I don't understand how a lake can be under the sea. Are there lakes under the sea? The location of a lake can be high. So if you have lakes, if there's a lake in the mountain, then the location is high, but the lake itself is not high. The lake can be deep or shallow in the mountains. I don't know if that makes sense. Thank you for our steep opposites, gradual or gentle. Excellent, Elena. Very, very good. So if something is steep, has a steep drop-off, it could be a gentle drop-off or a gradual drop-off. Very, very good. Plain. A steep or plain. Is that the opposite for steep, Andrea? Plain. We see here also that the cliffs can be high and low like mountains. And we said that cliffs can also be steep or gradual. Mountains can be also steep or gentle. Actually, mountains can be gentler, but a hill is a gentle. Hills are described as gentle. Hills are described as gradual. If it's more severe and more steep, then it's a mountain. Very good job, you guys. Okay, we want to describe our town. We want to talk about where we live. Do we live in a city or a town? Do we live in the countryside? We want to use the questions below to guide us. Thank you very much. A waterfall can be steep as well. Because if we think of a waterfall, how it drops off a cliff, a waterfall doesn't run down the side of a mountain. It drops off a cliff. So the waterfall can also be steep. Excellent. Very good observation, Danieri. Thank you very much. Let's look over some of these questions. How would you describe the streets in your city or the streets in your hometown? Are they narrow or wide? So now let's think a minute about where we live and our surroundings, and we want to describe them. What is the most important source of water? Is there a water source in your city or town? Is it fresh or salt? I think the fact that most of us live in the same area, I don't know how much salt water there is. And let's consider the third question also. What is the geography of your city or your hometown? Are there mountains? Or are there valleys or cliffs? Is there anything else? So let's think about where we live. And as you consider your surroundings, let's put little descriptions in the conversation box off to the side. Okay, so you can tell us where you live, the name of your city, the name of your town, or the name of the fraction that you live, the small neighborhood. For example, I live in La stazione, not at the station. I don't live at the train station, but I live so near to the train station that the neighborhood around the train station is called La Stazione. High. Monica, what's high? Are we talking about waterfalls? Waterfalls can be high as well. Waterfalls can be high and steep, as Danieri just told us. Waterfalls are similar to cliffs because they fall off the edge of a cliff. The water goes off the cliff, so they can be high and steep as well. As I was saying, describing my hometown, I live in a neighborhood called La Stazione di Montale. So the city is Montale. The neighborhood is La Stazione. And there are several characteristics. Now, from my neighborhood, you can see the hills of Montale, which are behind my house. They're gentle hills. They're not very high. So within maybe 20 minutes, you could reach the top. No, maybe a little bit more than that. Maybe more like half an hour, 35 minutes, you can reach the top. And they're very green, except for last year when there were those fires and they all burned up. A source of water, we don't have a source of water, but there is a river that runs from the top of the hill from, I believe it's Fognano, and it runs all the way down the hill through Montale, and it runs right through it runs right through my street because I live on a dead-end street. So the street ends because the river divides one side of La Stazione from the other. So right at the end of my street, there's the river that runs from the hills. And this river is a source of water. In fact, if you go up into Montale, there are the, what do you call it? The fountains where you can collect water. Yes. So consider your city or your neighborhood and write a small description, a brief description. Hey, Helen, thank you. Helen says, I live in Prato near the center, and here the streets are narrow. Okay, so Helen lives near the city center, so the streets are very narrow. Can you think of anything else? Considering the season, Helen, how would you describe your area? For example, if you are in the city center of Florence in August, sometimes it can be so hot. Okay, all right, outside the city center, thank you very much, Elena. Elena says, in Prato, we have a lot of congested, wide streets. So once you get outside, no, not in this period, no. I know, Elena. I even miss the traffic. If you can believe it or not, I miss the traffic. I used to hate driving to work because there was so much traffic. But I even miss the people in the cars on the road next to me. In fact, when I go back to work, I'm going to be blowing kisses to everybody. I will be so happy to see them. Me too, I know, right? I'm going to roll down my window and just say, hi, everybody. Hi, it's so good to see you, even though we're in traffic. Okay, Andrea says, we also have a lot of streets full of potholes. I know, which is terrible for your car because it destroys the suspension on your car driving through potholes. And the Ranieri says, I live in Mezzana and the streets are wide. The streets are wide. The streets in Alla Stazione, no, the streets are not very wide. In fact, if you're traveling through the old streets, the newer streets are wider. There's our comparisons. The newer streets are wider than the old streets. The original streets in Montale, the original streets in La Stazione are very narrow. In fact, two cars cannot pass. If you see a car coming, depending on the direction of the other car, one car moves over and lets them pass, and then another car keeps going. So the old streets, you have to know where they are, because I don't even know if they have names, but we know the direction that they go in. Okay, does anyone else have a brief description of their city or hometown to share with us? I described the geography of Montale and La Stazione. Here it is very, very flat. And interesting enough, in Prato, we have a lot of roundabouts. There are a lot of roundabouts. And unfortunately, Elena, not everyone knows how to use the roundabouts. That's the worst part. There are roundabouts everywhere, and no one knows how to navigate the roundabouts. Andrea, thank you. Andrea says in Prato, the streets are getting narrower because of larger footpaths. You notice that too. Which is good. They're encouraging people to be more active and more physical. But at the same part, it creates difficulty for the drivers because there's less parking and the streets become more congested, as Elena said, or will become more congested once we're out and about because they're narrower. So it's just logic. If you have a street with two lanes and you take one lane away and you only have one lane, obviously the traffic will be slower and more congested. Okay, I said that ironically also, another fun fact about Montale, actually the La Stazione di Montale, is that we are in a valley. We're actually in a valley. So when it rains, we're underwater. Yes. When we have severe rainfall, the entire train station and the areas around it are underwater. And Gianmarco says the streets near English in the City. Have you seen all the construction they've done? The streets were wide and now they're narrow. There was more parking and now there's less. And the sidewalks are wider. Sidewalks are important. Yes, I believe sidewalks are important for the pedestrians. But if I go to work and I no longer have parking for my car, I cannot walk from La Stazione. Yes, in Montale we have an amazing underpass. Is this the underpass? The underpass at the train station? The train station is the border of Montale and Alliana. If you're on one side of the train station, you are in Montale. Once you go under the train station, the underpass, and you come up on the other side, you are in Alliana. And this underpass, there are two underpasses. One is for pedestrians. It goes underneath the train station. The other one is for cars, which goes underneath the tracks. When it rains, when there is severe rainfall, the underpass is underwater. And we're not talking about shallow water. We're talking about deep water that can cover your car. That's what it means when you live in a valley and there is severe rainfall. Listen, everyone, we're coming to the end of our focus. In this morning's focus, which was an incredible geography lesson, we went over vocabulary of geography. So what did we talk about? We talked about different geographical features like valleys, rivers, deserts, islands. Yes, we do. We have a beautiful river in Montale. Thank you, Andrea. Canyons, lakes, mountains, and cliffs. In reviewing these geographic locations and these geographic features, we went over adjectives that we use to describe them. For example, what were the adjectives that we reviewed to describe these geographical features? We remember describing, let's see here. These are our adjectives: wide and shallow. No, wide and narrow, deep and shallow, high and low. Then we use these adjectives to describe our geographical features. And we also went over the difference between comparatives and superlatives. We know that comparatives compare two things, but superlatives are the most of everything. We use the example of my house. My house is big. My sister's house is bigger than mine. My brother's house is the biggest of all. And we reviewed certain superlatives in these geographical features. For example, the deepest lake in Russia, the widest river or the longest river in the Amazon, or the highest waterfall in Venezuela. Listen, we're at the end of the focus for this morning. Does anyone have any questions about geography, about grammar, comparatives or superlatives, or anything else? So if no one else has anything to add, then we've come to the end of our focus. Listen, everyone, have a wonderful afternoon. Have a wonderful afternoon, and keep in mind that we are here every day, all week long. So log in next time for the next focus activity. I will be here also again tomorrow morning. And everyone have a great afternoon. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone, and see you next time. Bye, everyone. Have a great day.